So this is the video for lesson 96 for Algebra 1. Now I'm going to show you a couple of different things and the book shows you on lesson 96. We're actually not going to graph these quadratic functions. We are going to find the vertex and talk about a maximum and minimum and that kind of stuff, but we're not actually going to graph them, and we're going to talk about the axis of symmetry again. But first, before we do that, I want to go over a few homework problems. This was in a homework problem. I wanted to show you how you should have worked this. You should have taken the square root of 4 first. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 minus 6. You need to do order of operations, which means you do everything in parentheses first and then you square. Okay? So you should have done the square root of 4 to get 2, and now do 2 minus 6 and get negative 4, and negative 4 squared is positive 16. That's the way that one should have been worked. So you need to make sure that you show that you show that you redo this on the notes. Then there was another one that had 8x plus 2x squared equals 0, and you were supposed to find the axis of symmetry, okay? Axis of symmetry is that x equals negative b over 2a. We're going to go over this again and also talk about another thing that this does. But in this problem, y'all said that 8 was a and b was 2, which is incorrect. The order doesn't matter. You've got to look at what the 2 is attached to. The 2 is attached to the x squared. So the 2 is the a and 8 is the b, because the b is with x and the a is with x squared every time. It doesn't matter what the order's in. So don't look at the first one always being a. You have to look at what's with the x squared, okay? So then we would do negative 8 over 2 times 2, which would be negative 8 over 4, which would be negative 2. X equals negative 2. Some of you are still leaving off that x equals negative 2. So don't leave off x equals negative 2. Okay, so that's the 2 I wanted to do. I also wanted to make sure that you knew how to put a square root in your calculator, because several of y'all are messing this up. So I want to go over. And also some of you, okay, that's not in this, never mind. I wanted to show you how to take the square root correctly on your calculator. So here's the calculator that you should have. If you don't have this kind of calculator, then you're going to have to figure it out on your own. But we've talked about this before, like when we were still in class together, I talked about how to do this. So some of you have forgotten, I guess. So what you do is you hit second and you hit your x squared key, and it brings on that radical like that. Then you put the 40 in and hit enter, and then round it to whatever you're asked to. So this would be like 6.32 or something if you round it to the nearest hundredth, okay? But it's always second x squared key right there. And notice the little root sign is above it. Don't use this key. Y'all don't know how to use this key. I haven't shown how to use this key, so you have to be very careful with this key. Come down to this one, okay? So second x squared key, it brings that symbol up there. Then put your number in and hit equals, okay? Now let me get to lesson 96. So you're going to be asked for something like y equals x squared plus 4x plus 5. You're going to be asked to graph this. We're not going to graph it. So in place of graphing, okay, so we're not going to graph, so I'm going to cross it off. In place of graphing, what we're going to do is we're going to find the vertex. We're going to find the axis of symmetry, which we've already been finding. So this is going to be a review over the axis of symmetry. We are going to decide whether it opens up or down. And we are going to decide whether it has a maximum, which if it opens up, it has a minimum. If it opens up, it has a minimum, which is your vertex. Your vertex would be the minimum, or part of the vertex would be the minimum. If it opens down, it has a maximum. Okay, so those are the things we're going to do. So in place of graphing, we're going to do this. And I'm going to show you this. So make sure when you're doing the homework, if it says to graph it, that you do this right here, that you do what I'm about to show you. Okay, so we're going to take that x squared plus 4x plus 5. Let me move it since I wrote underneath it. And first thing, we're going to find the vertex. The vertex is an ordered pair, like an HK or an XY. We're more familiar with XY, so we're going to talk about it as an XY now. To find x, you use that little formula for the axis of symmetry. You use negative b over 2a, okay? So my A is with the x squared, my B is with the x, and my C is the constant. So A would be 1, and B would be 4. So negative 4 over 2 times 1, so that's negative 4 over 2, so that's negative 2. So the x coordinate of my vertex is negative 2. Now I want to find the y coordinate, the second coordinate. So now you're going to take that x and you're going to plug it in. So negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 plus 5. Negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 plus 5. Negative 2 squared is positive 4, so make sure you square those negatives away and get positive. Minus 8 plus 5. So 4 minus 8 plus 5 would be 1, okay? So my vertex is negative 2 comma 1. And that's the hardest thing you have to do on this, is that right there, finding your vertex. Now your axis of symmetry is the x coordinate of your vertex. So now we're just going to identify some things from the vertex. My axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. You're going to decide if it opens up or down. Since my x squared is positive, it opens up, which means it has a minimum. Since it opens up, it has a minimum. And that minimum is the y of the vertex. So the y of the vertex is 1, so my minimum is y equals 1. That's what I want you to do. This is all I want you to do. I want you to find the vertex using negative b over 2a and then plugging back in. Identify, once you get the vertex, you can identify this stuff. Okay, we're not going to graph it, but we're going to find that stuff. Vertex, axis of symmetry, whether it opens up or down, and minimum or maximum. Okay, so let's try another one. Now let's see, y equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. So first I want my vertex. So I start out doing x equals negative b over 2a. Remember, this is also how you find your axis of symmetry. So a is here, b is here, c is my constant. So negative 5 over 2 times 1 equals negative 5 over 2. Negative 5 over 2 times 1 is negative 5 over 2. So my vertex starts with negative 5 over 2. Now to find the y, to find the second one, you plug this in. So negative 5 over 2 squared plus 5 times negative 5 over 2 plus 6. Okay? So then 25 over 4 minus 25 over 2 plus 6. When you do that multiplication, when you square the negative 5, it's positive 25. When you square the 2, it's 4. And then 5 times negative 5 is negative 25, and you leave the 2. Okay, don't do 5 times 2 and get 10. So then we make a common denominator, which you should know how to do. So this would be 50 over 4 minus, so 25 minus 50 over 4 is negative 25 over 4 plus 6. Common denominator again, so 6 becomes 24 over 4, which would give me a negative 1/4. Negative 25 over 4 plus 24 over 4 is negative 1/4. So yeah, that's a nasty vertex. I'm going to try to make sure I don't give you any. That's kind of a nasty vertex. But that's your vertex. And once you get that done, once that job is done, now it's just identifying stuff. So there's your vertex. Then your axis of symmetry is the x of that vertex. So x equals negative 5 over 2. This is a positive x squared. Since the positive x squared, it opens up, which means it has a minimum, and that minimum is the y of your vertex, okay? And that's it. You've done it. You've got your vertex. Negative b over 2a is how you start. Once you find that, you plug it in. Again, this is a nasty one. Going to try to make sure you don't have nasty ones like this. Your axis of symmetry is the x of your vertex, so it's the first one in the vertex. It opens up because it's a positive x squared, so you've got a minimum. And your minimum is the y of your vertex. So this vertex, that's your axis of symmetry, that's your maximum or minimum every time, okay? Let's try another one. Whoops. Really want to find one that opens down. Here we go. Let's see, negative 2x squared minus 3. Y equals negative 2x squared minus 3. So I want my vertex. My vertex, again, I start with negative b over 2a, which is exactly how you find your axis of symmetry also. So when you find your x-coordinate of the vertex, you're finding your axis of symmetry as well. So here's my a. Now my b is not here. I don't have an x term, so b is 0. So that means I'd have negative 0 over 2 times negative 2, because a is negative 2. So that'd be 0 over negative 4, which is just 0. So the x-coordinate of my vertex is 0. Now, to find y, you plug back in. Negative 2 times 0 squared minus 3. So 0 squared is 0. 0 times negative 2 is 0. Minus 3 is negative 3. So there's your vertex. Then we identify things. Your axis of symmetry is the x-coordinate of your vertex. So x equals 0. This one opens down. Why does it open down? Because it's got a negative x squared. So this one opens down, which means it has a maximum, and that maximum is y equals negative 3. Okay? Negative x squared opens down, gives you a maximum, y equals negative 3. Okay. Let's see. Then let's look at one like this. Y equals 3x squared plus 18x plus 13. We're doing the same thing again, finding the vertex, which again, we start with x equals negative b over 2a, which is also how you find your axis of symmetry. So here's my a, here's my b, here's my c, because a is always x squared, b is always with x. So that would be negative 18 over 2 times 3. Gives me negative 18 over 6, which is negative 3. So there is my x-coordinate of my vertex. It is also my axis of symmetry, but I need to find the y-coordinate. So 3 times negative 3 squared plus 18 times negative 3 plus 13. Then you go through and you just work it out. Follow order of operations. You could even just type this in your calculator. Let me show you. You would do 3 and then parentheses, negative 3 squared plus 18 parentheses negative 3 plus 13. And that'll give you negative 14. So this is a negative 14, which means your y-coordinate for your vertex is negative 14. Okay, so you can plug it in your calculator just like that. So that's your vertex. That means your axis of symmetry is the x-coordinate of your vertex, so x equals negative 3. This opens up because it's a positive x squared, so it opens up, which means it has a minimum, and that minimum is y equals negative 14. Okay. So, okay, now we're going to do what's called finding the zeros. Find the zeros. When you find the zeros, you're going to factor. You're not going to graph this, okay? You're going to factor, and then from those factors, you're going to find the zeros, okay? So on this factoring, I want the factors of positive 9 that give me negative 6. So it'd be x minus 3, and these will be easy factoring ones, like x minus 3, x minus 3. So if I want the zeros, I want the number that would make this parenthesis 0. Well, 1 minus 3 would make it 0. 3 minus 3 would make it 0. So that's why these are called my zeros, because they're the zeros of the parentheses. Now again, you do not graph this. You find the zeros. You factor and then look at your parentheses and see what would make each parenthesis 0. So that's finding the zeros. These are also called x-intercepts. This is where they cross the x-axis, okay? So let's do another finding zeros. Y equals x squared minus 3x minus 10. So this would be an x minus 5x plus 2, because you should be able to factor it. This should be an easy factoring for you. We need the factors of negative 10 that give negative 3. So what would make x minus 5 0? 5. What would make x plus 2 0? negative 2. So there are your zeros. Those are your zeros. Your x-intercepts are also called roots. Okay? So again, you're looking at factoring them. So let's try y equals x squared plus 16x plus 64. So we want the factors of 64 that give 16. So x plus 8, x plus 8. Again, y'all should know how to factor these. These are easy. It's easy old factoring. And then what would make x plus 8 0? Negative 8. What would make x plus 8 0? Negative 8. So x equals negative 8 and negative 8. You're going to have two answers on these. I know this is the same, but go ahead and write it out twice. Those are the zeros. Those are the roots. Those are the solutions. So when you're asked to find the zeros, this is what I want you to do. I want you to factor and then figure out what would make the parentheses 0. Y equals x squared plus 3x minus 28. Y equals x squared plus 3x minus 28. So factors of 28 that would give me 3 would be 7. So a plus 7 and a minus 4. 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. Positive 7 minus 4 is positive 3. So negative 7, positive 4. Because negative 7 would make x plus 7 0, and 4 would make the x minus 4 0. So there are your zeros. Again, this is how I want you to find the zeros. You factor and then figure out what would make the parentheses zeros, okay? Now, you're going to see some that do not factor. 5x squared plus 9 doesn't factor. That means there's no zeros. There's no x-intercepts. So you would just put no zeros and go on. If it doesn't factor for you, then put no zeros and go on because it doesn't factor. One that we did earlier where we found the stuff, where we found the vertex, axis of symmetry, that kind of stuff, this one doesn't factor. So no zeros. Okay, so if they don't factor, there's no zeros. Then the last one on the notes I want to show you, and then I'm going to talk about some problems, is on page 641, example 5. They actually give you an equation right before it. H equals negative 16t squared plus vt plus s, where v is the initial velocity and s is the starting height. So it's the start height, okay? It's where it starts height-wise, okay? So that's an equation that you're going to have to use. You're going to have to use it on, what letter is it? On G. On letter G, you're going to have to use this. I don't know if they give it to you on there or not, but you're going to have to use letter G. So your starting height is S, your initial velocity is V. And so on that example 5, we've got a baseball is thrown straight up with an initial velocity of 50 feet per second. The ball leaves the player's hand when it is 4 feet above the ground. At what time does the ball reach its maximum height? So we want to find part of the vertex. We just want to find the x-coordinate of the vertex, or here t, time, which is x, okay? So we start out with the negative 16t squared. It tells us that the initial velocity is 50. It tells us it's 50, so it's positive. And it tells us that the starting height, the player's hand is 4 feet above the ground. So there's your starting height, okay? So we just want x, which is the same thing as t here. We want the time, which is x, and it's that negative b over 2a that we've been finding for several lessons now. So negative 50 over 2 times negative 16. Okay, so that would be negative 50 over negative 32. I don't know how many of you are still saying that a negative divided by a negative is a negative. It can't be. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So make sure you're careful with that. So you would do 50 divided by 32. This should be a positive. It's time. So your time would be about 1.5625 seconds. And that's all you want. That's the time it's going to take to get the maximum height, which again, we've talked about that before. We've talked about the time it takes to get the maximum height. It's just that negative b over 2a. It's finding the x-coordinate of your vertex is what's going on. Okay? So let's do another one of those. Y equals negative 16t squared. Actually, it's an h because it's a height after time. Plus vt, which is your initial velocity, plus s, which is your starting height. So this time my initial velocity is going to be 32 feet per second. 32 feet per second. And my starting height looks like it's an egg that's thrown from the top of a building, of a wall that's 20 feet tall. So my starting height is 20 feet. Okay, so negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 20. Then again, I want the time it takes. How long will it take for the egg to reach its maximum height? So negative b over 2a is what I'm looking for. It can be x, or here it can be t, okay? So a is negative 16, b is 32, and c is the constant. So negative 32 over 2 times negative 16. So that's negative 32 over negative 32, which is positive 1. So it's going to take 1 second for it to get to its maximum height. And this is what you're doing on practice G. Practice G is just like this. You're doing this right here. You're using this little equation. You've got it right here. Write it down on your notes so you know that V is the initial velocity, S is the initial height. Plug those in, find your A and your B, and just find that X, because they don't even want the maximum height. You're just being asked for the time it takes to get there, okay? So on your assignment, you're going to do the warm-up on page 638. See, be careful on 3 when you're plugging in that negative 2. Make sure you plug it in. So like on number 3 on the warm-up, you've got negative x squared plus 5x minus 6. So when you plug it in, you're going to have negative 2 squared plus 5 times negative 2 minus 6. Make sure you do this first. Negative 2 squared is 4. Then that's going to make it negative 4. And then go from there. Okay? So be careful with that. That'll make that negative 4 now, and then go from there. Make sure you finish these. Some of you are writing down what I tell you, and then you're not finishing them. And then on 4 and 5, you've got to find the axis of symmetry, which is x equals negative b over 2a. Make sure you put the x equals. Make sure you put, not x equals 0, because I don't know if it's 0. Make sure you put the x equals, okay? Be careful with your signs. Watch your signs. Like on number 5, your b is negative 3. So when you plug it in, it's going to be negative 3 over 2 times whatever a is, okay? So be careful with that when you've got a b that's negative. Then you're going to do the practice. You're actually going to do the practice A. I just want you to do A. I didn't actually put this on my MCS, so I'm adding A. Just find the vertex, your axis of symmetry, up or down, and then your maximum or minimum. Okay, so I just want you to do that one. I just want you to do that stuff on A. Then D through G, I've gone over on the notes. D, E, and F are finding the zeros, so make sure you factor for D, E, and F. Factor, and then find those zeros for the parentheses like I showed you how to do. And then G, I've shown you, you just need to find that negative b over 2a on G, which is what I did on the notes. Then I'm assigning 1, 4, 5, 11, 12, 13, 17, 21, 24, 25, and 30. Let me make sure I didn't mess up. 1, 4, 5, 11, 12, 13, 17, 21. This is a 24. That's a 24. 25 and 30. Okay, so let me go through here and see if there's anything I need to talk to you about. Number 1, just look at the graph. Number 1 gives you a graph, something like this. Just look at where it crosses the x-axis. Those are the zeros, okay? So just find the points. I think it crosses right there. Just find the points where it crosses the x-axis. Those are your zeros. 4 and 5, just solving equations. 11 is just on 11, go ahead and find the vertex like I showed you on the notes. Make sure it's the 3 comma negative 27, okay? So do the work, finding the vertex like I showed you on the notes on number 11. Do the same thing on 12. Like take A, find the vertex, see if it's 6 comma negative 160, and then go from there. But you've got to show on 11 and 12 finding that vertex stuff. 13 is just like G. You want to know how high it is. Actually, 13 is easier. 13, you just plug in the 0.5 for t. So on 13, 0.5 is t. Plug that in. So on 13, it'll look like this. 16 times 0.5 squared. Actually, negative 16. Sorry, negative 16 times 0.5 squared plus your initial velocity is 10 times 0.5, and your initial height is 6. So that's what 13 would look like plugged in. So you need to finish it from there. Then number 17. Okay, need to show you again how to work ones like 17. When you've got the absolute value like this, you need to solve two different equations. X minus 200 equals 110, and x minus 200 equals negative 110. Okay, so those are the two equations you need to solve. Okay, so you solve these two equations. You should solve those two equations. Then you're going to write something less than or equal to x, less than or equal to something. So the two numbers you find should go on either side of this. So solve those two equations, and it should go on either side of this. So make sure you finish number 17. Okay? Then 21, same kind of thing. You've got absolute value of 2x plus 10 equals 8. So you need to do 2x plus 10 equals 8 and 2x plus 10 equals negative 8. So set those two equations up and solve those two equations to find your answers here. And it doesn't have to be written any specific way because it's an equal sign, not an inequality. So that's 21. 24 is factoring. So I did want to show you this factoring on 24. You've got 6x cubed plus 14x squared plus 4x. You want the dimensions of the prism. So we've got to factor this. So it takes us through A and B, but we just need to do it. Okay, so we can actually take a 2x out of all of these. That would leave 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. Then from there, we've got to do the advanced factoring. 3 times 2 is 6. I need the factors of 6 that give me 7, which would be 6 and 1. So 3x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 2. So take a 3x out. You get x plus 3. Actually, you don't. You get x plus 2. Take a 1 out, you get x plus 2. So then you have 3x plus 1, x plus 2, and then 2x. Those are your dimensions. So I worked 24 for you because I wanted you to see that factoring again because some of you are still missing your factoring. So there's 24 worked out. Then on 25, you're doing the distance formula, which again, some of you are messing up your distance formula. So x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared. Okay, so there's your distance formula. So make sure you've got your distance formula written correctly. And then we've got 0, 0 for home plate. We've got 90, 0 for first base. We've got 90, 90 for second base. And we've got an outfielder. Oh, we've got third base. Sorry, third base is 0, 90. And then 150, 80 is the outfielder. Okay? So those are the points that you're given. It's home, first, second, third, and then an outfielder. And the outfielder throws to first base. So the outfielder throws to first base. So those are the 2 points you're using. 90, 0, and 150, 80. And you need to round it to the nearest foot. So just make sure you plug it in correctly. 90 and 150 are your x's, so they should go together, like 150 minus 90 here, all squared, plus, and then here your y's would be 80 minus 0. 80 minus 0 because it's 150 and 80. So then 80 minus 0 all squared. So that's the way you plug it in. But those are the two that you use. You need to round it to the nearest whole number because that's what you're asked to do. Then on 30, there's a couple of different ways you could do 30. You could take x plus 10 times x minus 2 and FOIL it and see if it equals x squared minus 8x minus 20. Or you could factor x squared minus 8x minus 20 and see if it equals this. So you either take this and FOIL it and see what you get, or you take this and factor it and see what you get and see if they equal. Okay? So that is lesson 96. Lesson 96 is due May 5th. That's next Tuesday. And I've given you the assignment. You can look on my MCS for the assignment. Now remember, I added A. I added A to it and told you what I wanted to see on A.